Good morning, and welcome to the 33rd East Kentucky Leadership Conference, our first ever virtual conference. My name is Peter Hilley, and I'm the president of the Mountain Association, and I'm honored to serve as chair of the East Kentucky Leadership Foundation. Our theme this year is Bright Lights in Dark Times. And while this pandemic has brought us some dark times, we have been inspired by the work we have seen across our region as businesses, organizations, local government, and everyday folks have stepped up to meet the crisis, help each other, and to be those bright lights. The pandemic, the resulting economic impacts, and the recent floods have all left their mark, even literally high water marks, that we won't soon forget. Through it all, you have worked hard and pulled together to get through this. And now, as more people are getting vaccinated every day, we can begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. As the dogwoods and redbuds are blooming, even through a late snow yesterday, we are lifted up by the eternal witness of renewal all around us. We are called to look back to capture the lessons we have learned. And we're called to look forward with hope. And we're called together today to celebrate the good work that has been done. We have a full and exciting program for you, and we've condensed it into just 3 hours each day, today and tomorrow, because we know it's a busy time. And really, we've all had enough screen time this year, haven't we? This morning, we will explore together bridging the divide between urban and rural with a great slate of panelists. We will remember 2 dear colleagues we lost in the past year. And we'll conclude the morning with a keynote from Governor Andy Beshear. Tomorrow, we have breakout sessions that will allow you to select from 5 different topics, and the sessions will repeat 3 times, so you don't have to pick just one. To wrap up tomorrow's activities, we will have remarks from the federal co-chair of the Appalachian Regional Commission, Tim Thomas. Next year, we'll be back in person again in Corbin, as we had planned to be last year when we had to cancel due to the pandemic. I want to thank the people of Corbin for all the hard work they did to plan that conference, even though we didn't get to have it, and the hard choice we all had to make to call it off. Please commit right now to join me in Corbin next April in person. I also want to thank our partners and supporters who did so much to make this year's conference possible. WYMT, who will be broadcasting the conference. Sponsors KCEOC, Clean Gas, and the Mountain Association. And our partners at SOAR, who provided the use of this conference platform, Colby Hall, Josh Ball, and especially Hannah Gabbard, who has patiently helped all of us learn how to do this online. You know, if this goes well, I want to give Hannah the credit, and if we run into some snags, it's probably my fault. Now, I want to turn it over to Hannah to give you all a little tour around the conference platform and tell you about some of the features you can use to communicate with us and with each other during the conference. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Peter. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. First of all, we want to welcome you this morning. As Peter mentioned, my name is Hannah Gabbard, and I'm the Digital Media Coordinator at Shaping Our Appalachian Region, or SOAR, as most of you know us by. We are very excited to be partnering with the East Kentucky Leadership Foundation to present their 2021 conference through the virtual events platform Hopin. We hope the next 2 days will be inspiring, uplifting, and most importantly, a celebration of the region that we are all lucky enough to call home. Before we begin with today's program, I'm going to give you a short tour of the platform to allow you to become more familiar with the functionality of Hopin. Please hang on just a moment while I share my screen with you. Peter, can you see that okay?
I sure can.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to start from the left to the right of the screen. Starting over here, we have the reception tab. That's where you all can go just to check out the schedule and see what's happening next. Then we move on down to the stage. The stage is where all of the main content will be happening today and tomorrow. So this is where you'll be at most of the time. Then we move on down to sessions. Sessions, we'll be using that button on Friday. We have 5 great breakout sessions and 3 time slots so that you can choose more than one. Moving on down to the Expo button, we have a couple virtual exhibit booths for you to check out at any point in time during the next 2 days. Coming over here to the right side of the screen, this is the place where you can network and engage over the next 2 days. So starting with the chat function, some of you have already been using it already this morning. So you can use the chat function to drop a question, to drop a comment, to just say hi. Just say hello to a colleague or a friend. And then over here where it says people, now this is a very cool function of Hopin. So if you click people, you'll be able to see everyone else that's attending the conference. You can scroll down, see who's there. And then if you see someone that you'd like to have a chat with or even schedule a meeting or a video call, you can select their name, like I just did, invite to video call, schedule a meeting, or just send a direct message. The last thing I want to show you all this morning, up here in the top right corner, you'll see I already have my headshot uploaded, but yours might just be a blue circle. So you're going to want to click this arrow and then find the button that says Edit Profile. When you edit your profile, you can add your name, your title, you can add a headshot, you can add your LinkedIn profile and several other social media channels as well. So that just allows the rest of our attendees to get to know you better. And that's about all that I have this morning, Peter. I do want to mention one last thing. Through prior experience, we have learned that the Google Chrome browsers and the Mozilla Firefox browsers are the most compatible with Hopin. So I would suggest using one of those over the next 2 days. It allows for less lagging, less buffering, and just an overall better experience. So if you're not already using one of those browsers, I would suggest switching over before we really get started with today's program. And that's all that I have, so I'm going to turn it back over to Peter.
Thank you, Hannah. I also want to thank all of the speakers and panelists that you'll be hearing from today and tomorrow. One of the highlights of our conference every year is the awards ceremony, in which we recognize exemplary leaders from all walks of life. We've been able to honor hundreds of organizations, institutions, private and public citizens over the years across multiple categories. We'll return to those categories next year, but we decided the events of the past year called for a different approach. So this year, we set aside our usual categories, and instead, all of our awards will go to recognizing outstanding efforts to meet the needs of our region during the pandemic. In honoring these people and organizations, we also recognize that for each story we're sharing here, there are hundreds more. We're presenting 6 leadership awards this year, but in doing that, we also want to recognize everyone who has stepped up, leaned in, and gone the extra mile. And with that in mind, I'm pleased to present our first 2021 Leadership Award winner. Hannah, let's run that video.
So I was chaplain of the rescue squad.
A life built on service.
Was a teacher, a principal. I was on the rescue squad for 10 years.
That all began with a desire to be more than she was allowed to be.
In the 50s, in most Catholic schools, the high schools, the girls couldn't be in anything. You couldn't play in the orchestra, you couldn't be in any sports, just for boys.
Judy Yunker, fueled by plans for the future, moved to Floyd County in the 1970s to help create a place where women could take the lead.
I kind of all of a sudden realized that I was tired of being angry at the Catholic Church for the role of women, and that I could become an Episcopalian and still be a member of the community. So that's what I did.
Becoming a part of the community while building a life on the idea of serving the people around her.
I just felt that that women have a lot to contribute to helping others.
By 2009, Yunker channeled that passion into food insecurity, becoming a part of St. James Episcopalian Church and serving in the Fishes and Loaves food pantry.
I think you have to work together because people are so talented, and a leader has to work at bringing out and convincing the people around you that they can do and want to do.
This is chips and meat.
Through that mission, Yunker saw an obvious need, which she felt called to help alleviate.
And they have to have compassion. I think of the Dalai Lama's definition. He says, the goal, if a person is under a rock, the goal, empathy would say, well, you would get under the rock to feel what that person is feeling, but that's not the goal. The goal is compassion to take off the rock.
By 2011, she had retired from her career in education at Mountain Christian Academy and started studying for the priesthood, a journey that contained many ups and downs.
I just take one day at a time. I feel good. I've had cancer. I'm 6 years out and feel better than I've felt in many years.
But no matter the obstacle,
Feast or famine.
Reverend Sister Judy Yunker continues to serve with a smile.
I think the biggest thing is to be happy all the way through. You know, as it gets harder to walk, you just keep on walking till you can't walk.
Finding ways to give regardless of the circumstances.
Give to others, to share with others, to think about those folks that have less than you.
In the big ways and the small.
She's a good companion because it gives me something besides myself to think about, to care for.
Making memories.
So it's been an exciting life.
While leading with a servant's heart. Congratulations to Reverend Sister Judy Yunker, a 2021 East Kentucky Leadership Award winner.
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to our panel on Bridging the Divide, Connecting Rural and Urban. You know, in a time of global connection, rural Americans often feel more disconnected from the economy, from politics, and the culture driving the country forward. How do we find ways to reconnect with each other, the rest of the country, and the world? What values do we rely on? How do we, as East Kentuckians, fit into a changing country? In this session, we're going to look at the rural and urban divide and how we bridge it, what we hope to hang on to for the next generation. And we've got a great panel this morning, and I want to start by welcoming and introducing them. First, we've got Katie Kershaw joining us from Los Angeles. Katie's an actress and screenwriter from Hazard, who was featured in the HBO series Mrs. Fletcher, and before that, Fargo. She was also part of the group at Second City. Katie, good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Great. Early there on the West Coast. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, of course. I'm up. I'm ready to go.
Wonderful. Sylvia Ryerson is joining us from New Haven, Connecticut. She's now a doctoral candidate at Yale, and she's from an old East Kentucky family and lived several years in Whitesburg. She's done intensive research on urban inmates in rural prisons and just got funded to make a documentary film about those experiences. Sylvia, thanks for joining us today.
So great to be here. Thank you all.
Mill Duncan lives in California, but she spent a long time in Eastern Kentucky. Her book, Worlds Apart, examines rural poverty and why some communities do well and others don't. She's been a program officer at the Ford Foundation, a founder of the Carsey Institute at the University of New Hampshire, and is now a senior fellow at the Meridian Institute. And in fact, Mill was one of the first people to work at the Mountain Association, where I now work, which was then called Mason. Mill, you've also gotten up early this morning on the West Coast. Thanks for being with us.
It's good to be here. Thanks, Peter.
We're also going to be joined in a little while by Justin Maxson who was recently appointed by President Biden as Deputy Undersecretary for Rural Development at the USDA. Justin was formerly the president of the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation, and before that, he was president of the Mountain Association, which was then known as MASID. Justin's going to be joining us in a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and get the conversation started and just bring him in when he gets here. So, to get us started, what does the rural and urban divide look like from where you stand? Katie, you want to take a run at that?
Sure. I think in my profession, I'm constantly just having networking events, constantly having meetings where I'm pitching myself, selling who I am, and being from a rural area is the core identity of me. So I'm constantly talking to people in my industry that are just wildly misunderstood or have like a huge misunderstanding with what rural culture is, what Appalachia is, what Kentucky is. So I'm finding myself not only trying to pitch me and my art and what I create, but just trying to let people know who we are and what the differences are and what our culture is, because people really want to scream every stereotype in your face as soon as you sit down and you say where you're from. Like in every meeting I get into, it's, how did you get out? How did you do that? And it's like, well, I just drove out and I left the state and I moved to another place. There's this idea that I've some sort of like crawling out of some sort of like Appalachian mud and like made my way to LA or to the big city. So I find myself in my industry just constantly having conversations where I'm kind of dispelling all of these myths about who we are, and then the many stereotypes and myths that are true, just saying, yeah, that's a part of us. There's nothing wrong about being country and being who we are.
Mill, what about you? You've lived in Kentucky, you've lived in the Northeast, now you're living on the West Coast. You've had a chance to look at the urban-rural divide from both sides. What's it look like from where you stand?
Well, one thing I was thinking in just reflecting about our conversation today is that rural and urban places have longstanding connections because there's always been a lot of back and forth. And of course, this is the leadership conference. A lot of the leadership that I saw in my work in Appalachia and also in the rural South were people who had left and come back with different ideas about how a community can work and more ability to try to make change in places that are tough. So I think the rural urban divide that we see today, as Katie was saying, is rests on a lot of misunderstandings and also actual divides in how the economy is working for people. And after when we have a lot of economic decline, or as in East Kentucky, often the businesses and the economy is tightly held. You have a political system that kind of works against change. And so I think the rural urban divide is real. It's political, as we know, and it's cultural, as our friend Dee likes to say. But it's so rooted in economic circumstances. And I have to say, I'm very hopeful that this new administration, its commitment to investing in individuals and families and communities is going to make a really, really big difference and offer opportunity. I think, the lack of investment in rural communities for a long time now, it was in the 60s that Lyndon Johnson's administration commissioned the report they called The People Left Behind. And I think that notion is partly what Katie was speaking to, that people both feel left behind and have been left behind. And a lot of people had to leave in order to find opportunity for both economic and political reasons. But I think right now we all have reason to be very hopeful. We've always had good, brave leadership in East Kentucky and Appalachia, but I think it's going to kind of be unleashed if we can get the right investment in families and children and communities.
That's great. Sylvia, you've kind of looked at this from both sides. What's the urban-rural divide look like to you?
Right, and just thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this conversation and to be with you all. I think this is one of the most important questions we have in front of us. And I think for myself, I was a reporter and a producer at Apple Shop for 5 years in Whitesburg, Kentucky. And now I'm a graduate student here in New Haven. And so, you know, both working as a reporter in East Kentucky and then now as a student, I think from my current position, one thing that sort of stood out to me in terms of being at an institution like Yale is, I mean, quite simply, still the huge dearth of academic research on rural America at large, but also I think there's a tendency in academia to kind of reinscribe this dichotomy between what is urban and what is rural. In a way that elides a lot of these deep connections, both within the political economy and like you were saying, you know, a bit about histories of organizing. And so I also think that sometimes we can think about rural in the academy in very monolithic ways that always privileges agriculture, that doesn't actually attend to the fact that rather than thinking about this binary of urban and rural, there's a multitude of different specific conditions and contexts that are happening right now, and that East Kentucky has a specific set of conditions that connects it to a lot of other rural economies, but that we have to attend to the idea of, you know, that there are multitudes of rural Americas, that there's not just one kind of abandonment that is happening right now, and that creates different possibilities for organizing and connecting.
Great. And I'm getting messages that Justin is with us, but trying to get in. So we're working on getting him backstage. And then we'll bring him out on the stage as well. As Hannah is working on that, I want to start through a set of questions that'll maybe take us on an arc of thinking about this whole urban-rural connection. And Mill, I want to start with you because you have written extensively about communities, but really in rural communities about the divisions that exist within those communities themselves. How does that work? And are they somehow microcosms of this urban-rural divide that we see across the country?
Thanks, Peter. You know, as Sylvia pointed out, there's not just one rural America. And in my work, I've come to think of it as three types of rural America. Not, some people like to say, you know, you've seen one rural place, you've seen one rural place. But I think maybe it's the sociologist in me, there are patterns, and there are amenity-rich areas, and that's not the kind of place we're talking about today. Places like Aspen or coastal Maine, or where there are wonderful natural amenities that attract people for recreation, or laptop professionals, as people like to call them. And then there are transitioning areas. And in many ways, those are places that are really feeling like the rural version of the Rust Belt as the economy changes. And then there are chronically poor places. And really, Appalachia and East Kentucky is both an area that's transitioning as the coal industry and other work has declined, and it has had chronic poverty and low education over many decades. And in those very poor places that I've studied, I have, as you say, found long-term divides where there are really haves and have-nots. Everybody can name the big families that have historically, and maybe even in the moment, run the economy and keep tabs and control over the political situation. And actually, because the way things work benefit the haves, then they have the power to punish or blackball those who try to make change and open things up. And again, that's the case where the kind of leadership that this conference is all about is so both takes so much courage and also can make such a difference. So those divides mean that there is, people would talk about it all the time when I did interviews in Appalachia and in the Delta. They could not only name the families who run things, but they would say, you know, there really isn't a middle class here. And I think that's where the larger lesson for today comes in that when you have just the very privileged and and those who don't have opportunity, then there's not a middle class. Then the investment in the public sector is lacking. And so you don't have the kind of public institutions that are really important to give opportunity to children and to families. And so that those divisions and that extreme inequality prevents change and leads to what I call a kind of a weak civic culture. There isn't widespread participation in the local civic domain, and the privilege of those who are haves is prominent and dominant, and doesn't allow for the kind of change that's necessary to build opportunity. And it's those leaders, as I said, often return migrants, but certainly not always, often people who have some kind of asset, even an asset like education, that can make it so they're not vulnerable to retribution or blackballing. But those leaders make a really big difference in trying to bring about the investment, which, as I said earlier, is key. And I think that lack of investment that often is driven by a middle class that wants a strong public sector, good schools, and good after-school programs for young people and so forth, is a lot of what we need, and what this new investment that we're seeing begin to roll out with the Biden administration can start to make a difference in places like East Kentucky, and facilitate the work of the good leaders who are probably in this conference today and have been working a long time.
It sounds like some of that have and have not that you're talking about is social capital as well as financial capital.
That's absolutely the case. And I think of civic culture as a kind of other way of talking about social capital, that it's the way the community works and how open it is to opportunity, and how much people are involved and feel like they have access to opportunity. Oh, there's our old friend, Justin.
Good morning, Justin. Welcome. We're not yet getting your audio. You might need to make an adjustment to your browser settings to get your audio permission turned on. But go ahead and work on that. I want to pitch it to Katie. Katie, we're talking about these divisions. You've seen that here in our region, and you probably see that where you are on the coast. Do people talk differently about those divisions within their communities on the coast where you are than they do within communities in Appalachia?
Appalachia is just so, in East Kentucky in general, there's so much cultural divide and kind of that misunderstanding from county to county, from holler to holler, and there's so much distinction in what makes a person based on the street they live on. And I haven't seen, no matter where, from Chicago to New York or LA, people really feeling the need to divide the way we do sometimes in East Kentucky, with making the distinction of who they are and standing on that like strong pride of county to town to holler. I've never seen that intensity no matter where I've lived. And so it's only when I'm talking to another person from East Kentucky that we can really dive into all of those subtleties that exist between community to community. And it's always just so fascinating to me because I don't see it personally really anywhere else that I've been. Of course, when you're in Chicago, everyone has an opinion on a neighborhood, but when you're in East Kentucky, it's the fabric of your DNA. Depends on kind of what street you grew up on and what neighborhood you live in. And it changes everything about a person. It changes everything about what it says to a person about a person. And it does go back to that have and have not. And when you're born in East Kentucky, you're born with a chip on your shoulder. You know, no one thinks that you're gonna make it out when, you know, we don't need to make it out. We just need to thrive either where we are or wherever we choose to be. But there always seems to be a push whenever I talk to people about where I'm from, that I must have, you know, grown up there and must have just needed to leave that rural setting right away. And it's not that I wanted to leave there. I just simply had to, due to lack of infrastructure in the arts. There was no community. I left to go to high school. I moved to Lexington so I could do theater. So, you know, that happened right away. I strayed off topic, but you know what I'm saying.
That's all right. That's great. Sylvia, you've gotten a chance to look at this sort of flip side of urban inmates brought to rural prisons. What connections and commonalities have you seen, or what points of conflict?
Right. I mean, I think there's a few specific points I can make on this that I think what we've seen in Central Appalachia since the early 90s is that Central Appalachia has become one of the most concentrated regions of rural prison growth nationwide. And the ARC-defined Appalachian region now hosts 16 prisons that are federal, state, and private. And so for those facilities, for the federal prisons, people are coming from all across the country. And for the state prisons, for example, two of the largest ones are Red Onion State Prison and Wallens Ridge State Prison in the far southwest corner of Wise County. And Virginia as a state is one of the states in this country that has one of the most egregious racial demographic disparities in its criminal justice system. So over 50% of people in the Virginia state prison system are Black. Wise County is over 95% white. And these are people that are being sent from the center of the state, from Richmond, Virginia, from Eastern Shore, from Norfolk, to a county where there's no public transportation, there's no bus service, there's no train service. So it's actually impossible for many families to even get to visitation to visit their loved ones. And so this is an extremely isolating experience and a cultural divide that has been constructed by the way, the geography of how this system has been built and expanded so rapidly. I think one thing we need to consider, so I think there's both that geography of the prison system, and then now we also need to consider on top of that the recent expansion and explosion of the rural jail population, and how I can just pull up a few specifics, but since 1992, the Kentucky Department of Corrections has started to board a significant percentage of its state prison population in county jails. And as of February 2019, Kentucky had 23,000 people under state prison jurisdiction, but only 11,000 prison beds. And so nearly half of the people sentenced to state prison in Kentucky wound up in county jail custody. And the state is paying counties a per diem basis to hold these people in local jails. And so this is actually, many of those per diem rates are being sent to Eastern Kentucky counties in dire economic straits. And there is a very close relationship that Professor Judith Schecht at Eastern Kentucky University and Jack Norton at the Vera Institute have been looking at as the overlap of how, as the coal severance tax that these counties are receiving is declining, these per diem rates for county jail expansion have been a way for counties to actually get necessary public funds from the state to even keep open their basic services like the fire department, et cetera. And so I just think, thinking both about the jail expansion and the prison expansion, we need to reckon with how central incarceration has become in this moment of restructuring the economy in Eastern Kentucky. And I will just end by saying, I also think that this is we've seen visionary organizing on this in the region. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Jerry Roll, the executive director of the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky, who I'm sure is with us this morning, and Amelia Kirby, who have been doing an incredible initiative with the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky in relationship with the CGI initiative, working on issues of the criminal legal system in Eastern Kentucky. And also we've seen incredible organizing against the proposed federal prison in Letcher County. So I hope we can return to some of those questions, but I do think that the landscape of Eastern Kentucky demonstrates how this system of incarceration is at the core of the urgency of bridging this urban-rural divide as it's affecting all of these communities, and how we need to imagine futures that don't actually frame these communities in opposition, but actually we can transform the system that is not requiring a punitive future for us to imagine an economic future.
So Sylvia, there couldn't be any more tangible divide than that prison wall. So even though you've got these urban folks in rural places, there's as I say, a very tangible divide.
Yeah.
What bridges have you seen that have made possible interaction, even whether that is conflict or connection, and how has that shown up?
Yes, I guess I'll name two specifically. I think one in terms of connection. I think it's easy to think about rural prisons as, they are built on these extremely isolated sites. Many of them are built on formerly mined land, mountaintop removal sites that are really out of sight. And so I think there's, you could live in Wise County your whole life and never see Red Onion or Wallens Ridge. And so I think they are extremely invisibilized. But I also think we need to pay attention to how the expansion of this carceral system actually permeates the entire social system of these communities. And sort of on the, side that is worrisome to me is how the public school system and the community college system in the region is actually transforming around this development, in that when I was living in Letcher County, there was discussions about creating new vocational programs to train high school students to get these prison jobs, because they are high pay. Some of them are, specifically the federal jobs, are both high paying, but they're also extraordinarily difficult to get. And so I think we need to think about how this is framing the future for young people in this region, when prisons and jails are presented as a primary employment opportunity in this moment of decline of the coal industry. And I've spoken about in my work about we needed to think about how there are actually multiple school to prison pipelines. I think in urban America, we see how people are channeled into the system as being incarcerated. And I think that's true in rural America. And I also think people are being told that this is, a way to stay home and an excellent job opportunity. And we need to really think about the social and psychological costs of what it means to work in an institution like a prison and a jail. I think on the other side of that, I'll say there has been, I also think these walls are constantly transcended and new political solidarities are being built. And I think for me personally speaking, when I was at Appalshop, I got to be a part of the long-running Calls from Home radio show, which is on Appalshop's community station, WMMT. And this really grew out of connections between people incarcerated and DJs at the radio station who started to receive music requests from people inside. And Amelia Kirby was foundational to beginning this program. And that now has been happening for over 20 years, where every Monday night families from all across the country call into this tiny radio show and send messages out from family members to those incarcerated who have access to radio within their cell. And so I think when we have these family voices on air, when you hear from grandmothers and children and, mothers, fathers sending out these messages, it's a way of actually making visible this population is here and the families they're separated from. And I think that radio show has been pivotal in sort of fostering connections.
So those of us who work in rural often like to point out that rural America produces all of the energy, all of the food, all of the water that urban America relies on. You're also painting for us a picture that it's now producing much of the incarceration. And these are broken systems. They're systems that are not helping us to build a brighter future in what we know about the difficulty of people transitioning out of incarceration is not a hopeful picture. And we also face in our region a lot of people who are transitioning out of substance abuse disorder recovery. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of steep lifting to be done to reintegrate people into our society and into our communities. And instead, it sounds like we're just warehousing people and seeing that as another economic opportunity when, obviously with the collapse of the coal industry, we need to create new economic opportunities, but this is not really where we want to focus our efforts and attention. Justin, welcome. Have we got your audio working now?
You tell me.
We do.
Nice to see you all.
Great to see you.
Sorry, I'm slow and late. It took 3 devices to get connected.
And Hannah.
And Hannah. Thank you, Hannah.
Well, Justin, this whole urban-rural divide is often represented as a zero-sum game when it comes to federal funding. If somebody gets something, somebody else gets less. And when it comes to setting these priorities, why should the whole country care about rural?
Gosh, well, I think you sort of said it just half a minute ago, right? All of the energy, all of the food, most of the natural resources, a culture and a rich history that in some ways, is the foundation of so much of our country's past. Some of that is positive, some of that is not. And I just think, one thing about this administration is there's a recognition that the social fabric between rural and others has frayed, right? And maybe that's been going on a long time, but this president and vice president are serious about reimagining a relationship between the federal government and rural communities, and is really trying to be thoughtful both about the resources, right? They're trying to what was it? Make a higher pie, right? I mean, make a bigger pie.
Yeah.
That is a different allocation of resources toward long-term complicated challenges, and create a different politics around rural, right? People in communities, I am at USDA Rural Development, and we have 443 offices across the country. And there's a way to think about, with the right resources, helping support organizations and communities in some ways that help reimagine a relationship between those people and the federal government. And that feels as important to me as the actual investments in the economy and the infrastructure necessary to help these communities address long-term disinvestment and other challenges. So the case, I think, is pretty clear about why rural is important. And I think this administration is really trying to rewrite the history of disinvestment with unprecedented, like, I've never said the word billions as many times as I've said them in the last month or so, and actually meant the word billions, right? I'm not talking about billions and billions of stars, or so it's an interesting, different moment, I think, that we're in.
So we know that the Obama administration was just getting to this at the tail end of that administration. I know that that when you were president of the Mountain Association, then MASID, you were involved in conversations with folks at the White House, as were our colleagues at Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, and helping to shape what became the Power Initiative. And we're glad to have seen Power continue through the most recent administration. But it seems like we've got sort of a running start with the Biden administration because we have people that were involved in putting Power together in the first place. And also through vehicles like the National Economic Transition Platform, we're hearing a call for power that is really magnified by orders of magnitude. Power was millions. As you say, the conversation needs to be about billions. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Biden administration's got in mind, what plans you have with rural development? That's an enormous resource. For anybody that doesn't know, rural development is a huge division within the USDA and has tons of resources and programs. Give us a little sense of what's going on.
I'm glad to try, and I can't say I know all of it, but so I sit on the interagency work group on coal and energy communities, which is a work group aimed at creating a plan for communities that have experienced economic struggles because of energy transition, with a particular focus on coal communities. And the working group aims to be a process as much as anything else to focus federal investment on a number of communities over time, recognizing, I think even when the coal industry was at its height in East Kentucky, it didn't mean prosperity for everybody, right? And the challenges that East Kentucky faces, it took a long time to get there, and they've been around a long time, and that the solutions are going to take a long time. So this work group aims to be a whole of government effort to focus investment in these places, infrastructure, heat investment, workforce development, environmental heat remediation efforts that equal job opportunities, transition for the energy the sector. There's $10 billion in the American Jobs Plan for decarbonization of the rural electric co-ops, which will actually happen through rural development because of RUS, the rural utility services, a part of RD. So that work group, I think, is going to be a particularly important a focus effort. But on top of the American Jobs Plan, it sort of unlocks, a set of resources we've just not seen discussed in serious conversation for a long time, right? Just as an example, there are 3 provisions in the American Jobs Plan. One is a regional innovation hubs strategy that's going to drive a lot of money in 10 places over time to reimagine what's possible in an economy. 2 is there's a community revitalization fund, which is $10 billion aimed at place-based economic development around projects. And 3, there's a $5 billion capacity building fund aimed to provide multi-year general support to organizations to help them develop the capacity to then apply to and for other other federal resources. And just those 3 provisions alone are huge and unprecedented. And this is the last thing I'll say, y'all, I'm sorry, I'm sort of rambling on. There's a presidential executive order about equity, and that is not just racial equity, it's spatial equity. So the Domestic Policy Council, which is the body responsible for the development of domestic policy, like it's called, they are really trying to develop a lens to all of federal investment and policy to require there to be a rural crosscut across all of it. So, you know, whether that's transportation or education spending or the Department of Justice spending, the aim is to be much more intentional and strategic about how those investments impact rural. And that to me feels as important as all those other billions that are explicitly rural. So I'm cautiously hopeful, and you know, I believe the administration is sincere, and if we can make the politics work, this American Jobs Plan will be a huge step forward.
So, Katie, I want to come back to you. You're from Hazard. We've been involved in partnership with the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky. My organization, Mountain Association, has been working with folks in Hazard. They've had this Envision Hazard program for a long time, cultural rebuilding, downtown revitalization. The old bus station, the Greyhound station, has now been turned into the art station. There's been talk for a number of years about revitalizing that whole downtown area of Main Street. It's a pretty exciting idea. It sounds like, from what Justin's telling us, that there could be some really serious federal resources being brought to the table that could support that. But we know culturally it doesn't happen without the people in the community saying, you know, this is our thing. This is what we want to do. Are people in Hazard going to, first, are they going to believe what they're hearing from the administration about the resources that are going to be available, and how will they respond? And what's your sense of how this works culturally?
Well, I'm holding my Spotted Newt mug from Hazard's first bookstore since I've been alive, it was amazing. I almost, it sounds very cheesy, but I almost started crying when I went. It was just so amazing to be able to be in my hometown and to be in a bookstore and just kind of be in that space. I think seeing is believing, and I think, you know, the city government in Hazard is doing an amazing job of really putting a lot of this into action. And you drive through downtown and you see it. There's so much it does to a person when you just see vibrancy, you see beautiful colors and murals, you see the Arts Alliance downtown, you see the bookshop, you see the quilt shop. That gives you reinvestment in yourself. It gives you reinvestment into your culture, and it's doing so much. I got to go home over the holidays for a couple months, and unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I didn't get to truly, you know, integrate back into Hazard and in the town. But just being able to drive around and see how much has changed was amazing. I don't want kids to grow up and think, I have to leave. I want kids to grow up and think, well, I can if I want, and there's nothing wrong with that. Instead of this like push and pull of like, I need to stay because I'm from Appalachia and this is what we do and these are my people, or I can go and I can come back. Right now, it seems like it's all or nothing when someone leaves the region, instead of this like kind of open kind of line of transportation. It always feels like such a big decision to leave. It feels like a big decision to come back. But I think Hazard is doing a really, really great job. I wish those places existed when I was a kid, and I'm so happy for the kids that are growing and adults that are there right now to see this reinvestment that people are having within the community.
Mill, when we think about these efforts to revitalize our communities, how do we make sure it works for everybody?
Well, I think that it's the kind of combination of investments. I was just thinking, as Katie and Sylvia were talking about Appalshop and what a unbelievable resource Appalshop has been in the region. But what we've got now that Justin's talking about is real scale, you know, and I think that the scale and the kind of complexity of the investment. So to my mind, among the most important ways to achieve equity is to invest seriously in children, through really good childcare programs and early education and schools that work. And I think that when you combine that with the kind of hopefulness of investment in arts that Katie's talking about, or in the energy transition that Justin was talking about, and you combine that with a human capital investment, I love to, not I love to, but I think of Amartya Sen's comment that poverty is about deprivation, being deprived of the opportunity to live a full life, a healthy life, an educated and creative life. And I think that the combination of these investments that we're seeing begin to unfold now, and that Justin is at the heart of, are going to have an opportunity to address the inequity. And if we can see more broad spread participation and leadership, so that there's a vibrant middle class as part of the outcome. And that, again, to your earlier point, Peter, is about the relationship of what we see in poor rural communities to the larger national conditions. That if we can invest in people across the board, but especially in human capital, so that people aren't deprived of the opportunity, but have the capability to live full and creative lives, like Katie was talking about, whether they're in Hazard or Chicago or Los Angeles, then that investment is the way to address the inequities that are so long-standing. But partly it's about, leadership and voice, the kind of voice that Appalshop, for one, is long championed, but there's been a lot of kind of accepting the way things work, because there's been so little opportunity. So I think we're in a pretty exciting moment right now.
So when we think about the folks not on the opposite sides of the urban-rural divide, but on the opposite sides of these divides within their own communities, is there a ground for building connection and shared interest between the underserved groups in rural and in urban? I watched a documentary a few months ago about the Black Panthers, and they were talking about the Black Panthers working with a group of Appalachian expatriates in Chicago, and this sort of natural connection that they found. And I think about, I grew up during the 60s. I remember seeing the marches, and oftentimes Black and white people together marching with a shared purpose for making these changes that the country so desperately needed, and as we are seeing, still so desperately needs today. Sylvia, is there a way that we can foster that connection of underserved people in urban and rural places in a way that not only helps to cross the socioeconomic and equity divides in our country, but also maybe can knit back together some of this fabric of urban and rural interests?
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for this question. And I think I could lift up three specific examples. One is I remember seeing at the height of the Charles Booker campaign, when Charles Booker came to Whitesburg, Kentucky, and the entire main street of Whitesburg was out marching with Charles Booker. And there's a photograph of a dear friend and incredible organizer, Tanya Turner, marching next to Charles Booker. And Tanya is a longtime DJ of the Calls from Home radio show, which formerly was called Holler to the Hood, and the tagline for Charles Booker's campaign was Hood to the Holler. And so it was just really incredible to see him wearing the Hood to the Holler t-shirt on Main Street in Whitesburg. And I think his campaign really demonstrated the potential of these political solidarities across the state. I think I also want to point to the importance of cultural work in building those alliances, like Katie was saying. I think another example that needs all the support it can get is it's so great, Mel, to hear your shout outs to Apple Shop. I also think Higher Ground in Harlan County is doing extraordinary community work. It's a community-based theater production, multi-generational, and I think that kind of work is so crucial in these moments of transition where people can feel connected to each other and feel proud of the community history in a way that isn't being co-opted by pro-industry forces, and is a way to grapple with both, you know, the economic enormity of what's happening right now, and also the cultural enormity of how do we identify with the history of our communities and how do we do this collectively. So I think Higher Ground to me is just pivotal in doing that work. I think in this moment of opening, people can be pulled in multiple directions. So I think it's a time for organizing and cultural organizing. And I think the last thing I'll say is, you know, a few miles down the street from, you know, we saw this happen in the summer of 2019 when the Black Jewel protest erupted on the railroad tracks in Harlan County. That it was this moment of, I would say, opening up a different kind of conversation of what the possibilities are along political lines that have long been polarized between quote pro-coal, anti-coal, but that it's a moment of reimagining together. And I think we saw an openness to new conversations happening in that moment that was really profound. And I would say, you know, the summer, so Black Jewel protest happened in 2019. The summer before, in 2018, the Poor People's Campaign came to Harlan County, and Reverend William Barber and his colleagues had a listening session in the East Kentucky Social Club, the historically Black social club in Harlan County. And so I think those kinds of efforts, people like the Higher Ground and like the Poor People's Campaign, that presence right now in this moment is, the Poor People's Campaign is working to build those connections, and the Charles Booker Campaign is working to build them. And I think the work of places like Apple Shop and like Higher Ground is a way that people can feel culturally connected to that political work.
The diversity of this place is something that's often overlooked, and I'm glad you brought up the East Kentucky Social Club and all of this work. Justin, you had a comment. Go ahead.
Oh, I really appreciate Sylvia's three super specific examples. I think they matter a lot. I generally try not to agree with D. Davis in public, but this is a time actually where I think the importance of cultural organizing is critical. It's like, it is those relationships that are going to transition us through the divides, I think, within communities and definitely between communities. And I often think of that as a challenge vis-a-vis the seat I'm in right now, where, it's about scalable investment in infrastructure and all sorts of things that are important, but all of those opportunities, all of those projects potentially are also opportunities for a relationship building. And how can we as the USDA think about our work in such a way, we've got 5,000 staff all over the country, and how do we think about those projects as a way to support community conversations and relationship building that helps, like, as you say, there is a lot of diversity within communities, and there's much more connection between people than folks first think there is until you get into those actual conversations. So I'm sort of trying to take it as a challenge in the seat I'm in. How does an infrastructure-oriented organization think about relationships as important to the fabric of what it does?
I want to come back to the culture question, and Katie, this is for you. The rest of the country often gets its image of Appalachia from mainstream media depictions, of which the Beverly Hillbillies is probably the one we love to hate the most. But it happens in all kinds of ways. It happens in the news stories that get told. It's the the B-roll of poverty porn that they always want to show when they're talking about what's going on in this region. How can we depict rural America and Appalachia in particular in a way to the rest of the country that does it justice?
Well, I think it comes down to putting Appalachians in the seat of power of creating that content. We need Appalachian people telling our stories and in the writers' rooms. And when thinking about us in the media, hillbillies, rednecks, we're like the last thing we can all agree we can make fun of. Like working in comedy for so long, it was just so easy for my colleagues to revert straight to a country accent, a Southern accent, and play to just the lowest hanging fruit. And we accept that. What's wrong with that? They're white people. Who cares? They're poor. We can make fun of them. And what's so upsetting to me about that is that Appalachians are so much funnier than those depictions. Like, we are a funny people. We have such a great sense of humor. Our stories are unbelievable. The way we live our lives is powerful and unique and so different, yet we're still so tied in the media to these stereotypes. And it's just so upsetting. When I was starting out in comedy, I found myself just improvising or getting into scenes and work that I do, and a colleague would start a redneck character, and I would just, it was like I would see red and rage and just immediately just go away from the content of the scene. So it's like, you're not understanding who we are. You don't see who we are. You're seeing these broad ideas that come from the TV in the 80s that don't feel in any way authentic. But as I've gotten older, my rage has subsided, and I've found ways to actually communicate with people and show them how funny we are, how interesting we are, how beautiful we are as a community and a culture. And I don't think change will happen in that regard until we do see that authentic representation on TV and film, because no one has anywhere to go to see who we are. And I keep seeing more and more things being done in TV and film that's set in Appalachia, not made by Appalachians, and pretty much exclusively about the opioid crisis. And it feels like, okay, now we're updating what we've seen as what it means to be country, what it means to be Appalachian, and we're just putting it straight to the opioid crisis instead of having this like base level understanding of who we are out into the media. So yeah, I think it's just going to take time. It's going to take time for Appalachian writers to get in the writers' rooms of these shows, to create these shows, to tell these stories, so we can start seeing who we really are.
That's great. You reminded me of one of my mentors, Loyal Jones, who was the Dean of Appalachian Humor. We honored Loyal for his life's work with one of our awards at the East Kentucky Leadership Conference a few years ago. But Loyal explained that the real Appalachian humor is the humor that turns the table on the person who you think coming into the story is the smart outsider, but it's the slow talking normal fellow who's actually seeing the real picture and turns the tables, or the wise old granny woman. Those cultural archetypes are powerful, and they get used negatively, but it seems like we've got a lot of opportunities to turn those around.
Yeah, humor comes from the funniest things are from the unexpected. If we put that, country granny on TV and she doesn't know anything and she's backwards and she's this and she's that, okay, fine, we've seen it. But if we play her authentically with the strength that she has, the stories that she has, and just, personally, my granny is the funniest woman I've ever met in my life. Like, if you played her on TV, it would not be what you expected at all. And it would just be far funnier, which I think is where my frustration comes from. We're just a funnier people than what media likes to play us as. We're funnier than any of those things.
Mill, you've worked extensively in Appalachia, but also you in your book you covered the Deep South, you covered New England. What's different in these different parts of rural America, and how does that illuminate this conversation?
Well, when I talk about poor places and poor people, I often find that as I reflect that there are so many more similarities than differences actually between urban and rural communities or urban and rural people and commitment to family and so forth. So I think that what you see in persistently poor places, whether it's an urban area or a rural area, is this lack of a middle class and this and corruption and control that's very that blocks change and change agents. And I think one of the benefits of the comparison I was able to do was that the New England community had a robust blue collar middle class and a lot of public community-wide opportunities and institutions, whereas in the rural South and in the Delta and in the Appalachian community that I studied, the have-nots and the haves used different institutions. They went to different churches, they went to different schools. And I think that one of the opportunities, as we've been talking about today, and as Justin described, for investment in a community that is deep and has scale. And I think one thing that's emerged from everybody's comments is the importance of widespread participation. That when there's, and in a way, that's what Higher Ground does, right, Sylvia? I mean, it's people from all different walks of life talking together about hard things, but also coming together to try to envision a future that's better and that's been widely there's buy-in across the board. And so I think that when we're talking about rural urban divides and bridging it, that the opportunity here to make the most of that investment. I remember when my husband Bill and I first moved to Kentucky, we were in a lot of conversations when that land ownership study was going on. And so many people who were touched by the War on Poverty workers, where, some small water co-op or health clinic offered the opportunity for people to be involved, and it changed their lives. So I think we've also emphasized the importance of social capital and relationships in this conversation. And I think that, as Justin says, being mindful of giving people the opportunity, and this is really Katie's point as well, I think, to speak for themselves and work together. It seems kind of trite to say it as I hear my voice, but I really do think that that's going to make the big difference in change, and that it builds that civic culture, builds that the characteristics of a middle class that are so important for enabling change and widespread opportunity.
So we're facing now, not just in our nation, but really globally, vast changes in our economic systems. And a lot of this is driven by changes in our energy economy. It's driven by the growing awareness of the climate crisis. And this conversation about transition is happening in a lot of places. We've had the good fortune to work with people in Alaska, in the Navajo Nation, Hopi people, where they've become dependent on an energy economy that's changing. Here in Appalachia, in some ways, we're sort of ahead of that curve because we've been dealing with the loss of energy jobs for more than 70 years. Our coal mining jobs peaked in 1949 in Kentucky at 75,000. And by 2012, we were down to just 20,000 jobs in Kentucky in the coal mining industry. And that was because of the mechanization of the mines. But through the cycles of boom and bust, it was hard to see that overall decline. You saw jobs come back, you saw jobs go away. It looked like it was just going back and forth. But throughout that time, we were losing more and more jobs. And of course, the economic impacts of that, even as those became better paying jobs. when coal fell off the cliff in 2012 because of cheap natural gas, suddenly our leaders were forced to notice in a different way that there was a drastic change happening. But in fact, it's been happening here for a long time. A lot of these other places are at different points on that trajectory of encountering the transition. You know, the Navajo generating station just closed down a year or so ago, and they're now facing a loss of jobs, but it's a relatively new thing there. In Alaska, they're seeing some decline in the oil industry jobs, but it hasn't really fallen off the cliff in the same way that coal has. Now, we can look back to places like Detroit that had, for a long time, a very strong industry, but their major industry collapsed. And I think what we're seeing and what we're going to continue to see in places all over the world, urban and rural, is that whatever used to drive the economy there isn't going to drive it anymore. And people are going to have to find new ways. We hope those are better than prisons. We believe that in Appalachia, the answer isn't going to be to replace one mono-economy with a different mono-economy. That's not going to be one thing. Justin, I think you are quite well known for saying there's no silver bullet, but there may be 1,000 silver BBs. And you know, what do we do? How do we not only think about our own economic transition in this region, but as we do that, think about how it creates these bridges to other places, rural and urban, all over the country?
You know, one thing, Peter, I'd just throw out as we answer your question is that I think the potential for stewardship is so great, and the stewardship of these natural resources, and that one thing that holds people to their rural homes is their love of the natural environment that they, you know, just breathe in and believe the mountains are their friends and their family as much as their actual friends and family. And so I think as we think about climate change and transition of the energy sector, we have a real advantage to nurture that stewardship and see it as a opportunity that's an economic opportunity as well. When I went back to the Appalachian community I had studied in the 90s, 20 years later, you know, people would say, oh, the trout are back in the rivers, we've got elk in the woods again. You know, there was a real pride in environmental kind of restoration and the stewardship that enables it. So I'll stop there. But
Secretary Vilsack says a very similar thing, that, you know, one of the obvious differentiators that rural communities have as you know, compared to urban ones is they're rural, right? And all of the natural resources that the country depends on are at their, you know, are super proximate. So there is a real need to figure out what mechanisms allow the healthy use of those landscapes for economic opportunities and job creation. You know, a working landscapes approach, you know, whether that's forests or outdoor tourism or ag. And this is a place where it feels like, again, I think the government could and should play an important role by helping create markets that support environmental health and economic opportunity, in addition to cleaning up, you know, I mean, 100 years of crappy practice. There's a lot of economic opportunity. And again, if there's the right sort of federal investment. But of course, I do think there are infrastructures like broadband that really need to be everywhere. And that, you know, that last chunk of communities that are underserved, and it's not small, including I think tribal communities, that's going to take a big federal, you know, a public investment, as is water and sewer, right? Like if we look at broadband and water and sewer, and clean and affordable power as human rights, in that they're public goods that the government should ensure everyone has access to, that is a huge economic opportunity. And I think a little bit we're seeing a transition toward those pieces of infrastructure as necessary for everyone, and that the federal investment needed to get there is gonna follow. And you see it in the American Jobs Plan. There's $100 billion for broadband.
That's a great point, Justin. And broadband can do so much to level the playing field in a geographically dispersed area like we're in. One of the key things that we've noticed about that comes from some research that CEDIC did at the University of Kentucky, where they looked at every county in the state. And one of the things you could see was that there's a big difference. Some places like Jackson County are completely wired. They've got high-speed fiber to every home and every business in the county. And just a couple counties away, it may be only half that much availability. But when we looked at the numbers, we also saw that in these economically distressed communities, even where it's available, you've got about the same percentage of people that are not connected because they can't afford it. And I was really glad to see in the president's plan that the affordability question was raised, because we've got to think about broadband the same way that we think about school buses. And your kid doesn't have to have a quarter to go get on the school bus. They just get on the bus and it takes them to school, because we know that it's in everyone's best interest for all those kids to get educated. And that fiber is the modern school bus. And it's also the modern highway. And we've taken down the toll booths on the Mountain Parkway and the Hal Rogers, because they're paid for now. And once this infrastructure is out there, we need to make sure that everybody can drive on it without having to pay a toll.
Yeah, and I would just add, it's a platform. It's not the answer to the question. It's a critical ingredient that allows a lot of other possibilities. And I just think we can't stop at access. There's a lot more to figure out about how does it actually support a healthy economy and communities. But folks have to have it. And obviously the pandemic has just shown how important it is for, so many things.
Yeah, the pandemic has probably jumped us 10 years ahead in our utilization of these technologies. Last year, when we had to cancel this conference, it was just unimaginable that we would do anything but cancel it. This year, realizing that we still weren't ready to have one in person, having a virtual conference was the obvious thing. And now everyone is a lot more accustomed to this technology. I think the technology is probably always going to stay ahead of our ability to use it well, but practice, right? We've got a few minutes left, and I want to give you all a chance to share any overall reflections that you've got on any of the topics that we've touched on today. It's been a great conversation, but I don't want us to leave here without giving you a chance to share some additional observations that you've got. And if that brings us crickets, then I'm going to channel Dee Davis, who suggested a question for each of you. Happy Chandler said he never met a Kentuckian who wasn't coming home. And we know that there are Kentuckians all over the country, just like you are, Katie. And you've all, either from here or not from here, spent a good bit of time here. If the pandemic was over and we could go to any restaurant we wanted, once again, what's the restaurant in East Kentucky that you would like to take a group of your friends to and have a wonderful meal? Whether it's a restaurant that still exists or just one that you remember. Katie, how about you?
Oh man. I mean, I think I would probably take him to my granny's house, but if not, Francis's Diner in Hazard, Kentucky, 100%. Without a doubt, that's where you got to go. I think that's the solid, clear answer for me.
What would you get? What would you order?
Oh man, everything that I can't eat anymore because my stomach just could not handle. The broccoli cheddar bites, 100%. Those are there. I took a friend of mine when I moved to Lexington down to Hazard, and we went to Francis's, and a friend of mine ordered a mixed vegetable tray, and he got just a plate of fried vegetables. And my friend from Lexington was so confused. I was like, well, where are the vegetables? I was like, oh, they're there. You just got to figure out which shape is which. So I would definitely get broccoli cheddar bites and those fried vegetables. I think that would be my order right now.
Sylvia, how about you? Where would you take your group of friends and what would you order?
Gosh, I guess I always maybe to get a hot dog at the Oven Fork Mercantile in Eola, Kentucky, and then you can go on a hike on the Pine Mountain Trail right around the corner and up to Bad Branch Falls. But Oven Fork has amazing hot dogs, so I would love to go there and see what else is to be found at the Oven Fork Mercantile.
Mill, what about you?
Well, I can't think of a specific place right now, but it would certainly be a diner-like place, and it would be a good breakfast that included biscuits, to be a little bit stereotypical, and probably bacon and eggs and some great fruit. I don't know.
Justin?
Oh, probably a piece of pie at the Courthouse Cafe in Whitesburg. But, this is probably unpopular, and I know that things have changed, but I don't first think of Eastern Kentucky as where I want to go out to eat. Just, and maybe, there's plenty of good home cooking, and I know there's been a growth of restaurants all over the place, but I need to do a little bit more. I'm learning about those opportunities.
Y'all need to get back a little more often. We've got a lot of great places to eat in East Kentucky these days, and it keeps getting better. Personally, I'm looking forward to walking across the street from my office to the little bagel shop right across the street when we reopen our office again. And we're aiming to reopen the building on June 1st. It's been a long haul, but we are seeing more people get vaccinated every day. And I think that the reopening after this pandemic is going to be not just a return to where we were, but really an entry into a different world. And I think it's a world that's going to provide us new and better opportunities to bridge the divide between urban and rural. In fact, just the way that we've all learned to communicate so much more effectively digitally in forums like this conference presents us with new ways to meet each other, to learn about each other, to find those commonalities, and to find those ways that we can work together to build a brighter future that we all want to see. So thank you all for being with us today. Certainly appreciate your time, and special thanks to those of you on the West Coast that got up so early for this. Maybe our last bit of conversation has gotten you ready, primed for breakfast now. And we're going to take a break for 15 minutes. We'll start back at 11 o'clock. And so all of you in our audience out there, grab another cup of coffee. We're going to have some more music up on the screen for you, and we'll see you at 11. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was not a planned journey for me.
Before arriving at Appalachian Regional Hospital in Hazard, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Maria Brayman specialized in breast cancer as a pathologist in Montana.
I could serve more people administratively by changing the way things were done and improving things than I could behind the microscope, one patient at a time.
Finding her purpose in that administrative role.
I am very passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about being able to help improve health and wellness of people, especially in rural America.
That passion for rural America leading her to the mountains of Eastern Kentucky.
I really had no idea until I was there the disparity that can exist in access to quality health care when you are in areas that are more remote, where there are less resources.
Dr. Brayman credits her mother, who is also a doctor, for instilling certain values in her at an early age.
Live passionately. You know, you give back to others. That's where you get reward.
Having served the region for nearly 5 years, 2020 would bring a whole new challenge, the pandemic.
I believe it was February 24th, right in this room, where I started getting my team together and we started having daily meetings. And I think by the end of the week, we were almost constantly in meeting because things were evolving and changing.
As resiliency shined through the people on the front lines.
An incredible year in terms of the way that you see people come together and give everything of themselves. But it's also been heart-wrenching. You know, I think all of us know someone who's lost someone at this point, if we haven't lost people ourselves.
As she gives the credit to the doctors and nurses that battled every day.
My role was to try to make sure that they had all the resources they needed to keep them safe and to be able to care for the patients and the community as they needed us. This award is for all community members, all frontline healthcare workers, you know, who have participated in ensuring that we take care of our people throughout this.
Now as cases decline, she begins to look at what's ahead.
I'm excited to turn my eye on new exciting programs that we can, again, bring to rural America and do some exciting new things.
Continuing to focus on that passion of serving the people with quality health care in rural America, particularly right here in the mountains. Congratulations to Dr. Maria Brayman, a 2021 East Kentucky Leadership Award winner.
Good morning. Next, we're going to have in memoriam videos for two wonderful ladies, Dr. Carolyn Sunday and Peggy Satterley, who passed on during 2020. These two ladies dedicated their lives to Eastern Kentucky and to the Appalachian region and just were wonderful, wonderful ladies. Dr. Carolyn Sunday, a Harlan native, served 2 decades on the East Kentucky Leadership Foundation board. The Harlan Enterprise said that Dr. Sunday made it her life's mission to make Harlan County and southeastern Kentucky as a whole a better place. And she just was a wonderful friend of mine and a wonderful lady with a great sense of humor, and we all miss her so much. Peggy Satterley worked 48 years for state government, and most of those years working with the Appalachian Grants Program, helping people in Eastern Kentucky. She was dedicated, a wonderful lady who always had the best interest of Eastern Kentuckians at heart. So just join with me in really appreciating these memoriams that will follow. Thank you.
Our next recipient truly has a heart for Eastern Kentucky. She will tell you she's never met a stranger.
And you've probably already noticed that tonight. Now, she was the first in her family to earn a college degree. She spent more than 40 years giving back as a servant leader, focusing on what she can do to better the lives of the next generation.
Keeping talents close to where she grew up.
Born and raised.
Dr. Carolyn Sunday is a professor at Southeast Kentucky Community and Technical College. She also holds the title of Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion.
My job is to make sure that no matter who you are, when you come to Southeast, to make you feel that you belong here.
Her career started more than 40 years ago. She overcame many barriers before making education her priority.
A third generation of coal miners in my family, my granddad, my dad, and my brother.
A first-generation college student in a time when many women did not pursue higher education.
We were always taught to be very proud of who we were here. Grew up in this real international atmosphere with families from different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds.
Dr. Sunday attended segregated schools until high school.
Most of our teachers were not employed to stay on at the integrated school.
But instead of viewing these obstacles as stumbling blocks, she turned them into stepping stones.
Bloom where you plant it. I think I was planted very young to be who I was.
She hopes sharing her story with young minds at the college will help them overcome their own struggles.
It's going to be a domino effect on down the road that people are going to be servant leaders. There are lots of people that I've made a lot of contact with that's from Eastern Kentucky that I'm very proud of.
Her experiences taught her to advocate for women, minorities, and low-income students.
I believe in calling everybody leaders because I think that's what we are. That's what we have to be in the mountains.
A long list of accomplishments under her belt, she remains humble.
I do it for the good that I might do for others.
Now adding one more achievement to that list.
If you would ask me what I would like to be remembered for, it would be leadership.
The 2019 East Kentucky Leadership Award for Public Individual goes to Dr. Carolyn Sunday.
Now I do feel like a star. Thank you all. So humbling to stand before so many of you. And first, I would like to acknowledge to God and thank Him for this invitation to be in this life. Because without Him putting me here, I would not have started this journey. I would not have met many of you. Also, I'd like to thank the board for selecting me. I think they had it planned, but I'm so grateful to them. And I've been with these guys a long time, probably, 15 years or better, serving on the board. I'd love to thank my family who's here to support me. And they know to support me in right and wrong, so that's why they're here. And I would also like to thank Dr. Bruce Ayers, who is my mentor, and his leadership style is servant leader. And servant leaders simply means that you are so willing to lift others to be leaders. You're so willing to take your light and help shine, make others use your candle and burn, and it won't diminish any of you. Your leadership says that you have enough confidence to share and watch others grow. And that I am truly thankful for all the years that I've been at Southeast. I've worked with so many people, and people will say, you're somebody's boss. Not on any given day, I'm not. They work so hard with me. I don't own Southeast, so they can't work for me, and they work with me. And would you all stand? Now, this is just a few of the seeds that's grown into great leadership, and I've had to be here and witness it. And there are many more out here in America that's around. And I've always told them, if you can't lift, you don't push down. You have to lift. And that's what we all have to do. That's why you all are here, because you truly are leaders. And even for the young people, I'm going to call you a leader. And in my nursing home days, I know I'm going to find you in a leadership role, because you're not going to be a follower. For that, I'd like to say one of the quotes, and one of my mentors was Miss Maddie Knight, and she used to always say, I am one and only one. I cannot do all things, but the one thing that I can do, I would do it to the best of my ability. Thank you.
This next award has always been very special. It's named after my dear friend and your friend, the late Tony Turner. You know, Tony never met a stranger and loved Eastern Kentucky with all his heart, and he also loved the East Kentucky Leadership Conference. He looked forward to it each and every year.
Each year, the Tony Turner Award is given to someone who has helped our region grow and improve. This year's award goes to a woman who has spent nearly 2 decades focused on doing just that through her work with the Appalachian Regional Commission.
Peggy Satterly has worked for the Department of Local Government for more than 35 years, but since 1996, her focus has been on Appalachia.
I worked in the commissioner's office and would travel to, and we went to so many things in Eastern Kentucky, and that was always my favorite place to go. And I just got really interested because of the challenges and yet the opportunity.
She is the program manager for the Appalachian Regional Commission, a group covering Appalachian counties in 13 states, 54 of those in Kentucky. Their strategy is to help those areas grow and develop.
It's just my devotion to seeing improvement, and that's what's exciting. Since I've been working, I've seen improvement. It's not all doom and gloom anymore.
In her time at the ARC, Satterly says she has seen remarkable change, and it all begins with one thing.
There's that ray of hope out there, and the people themselves are the best resources, and that's what's going to develop and keep Eastern Kentucky alive, and I think they're going to do even better in the future.
She has helped develop grant programs specifically for areas in Appalachia.
You can work with grant programs and divvy up the money, but when you see it going to places where it's really needed and progress really being made, it's just really, really rewarding.
Satterly says through the years she has considered retirement a few times, but her love for Eastern Kentucky and its people keeps her pushing forward.
If there's something that really comes up, a new initiative that somebody that's going to follow me is going to come up with it, and I'm probably going to want to say, oh, I'm going to help with that. So that's kind of my philosophy. I don't want to ever give it up. As long as my health will permit me, I'm still going to work for Eastern Kentucky.
She says she is proud to be a part of continuing development and positive change in Appalachia.
I've had some wonderful folks to work with and wonderful leaders throughout the region.
But what she is even more proud of is to see Eastern Kentucky working to become a self-sustaining region.
I'm convinced that that's the only way that real change happens in communities. It has to grow from within. And folks in Eastern Kentucky are really learning how to do that.
The 2013 Eastern Kentucky Leadership Tony Turner Award goes to Peggy Satterly.
You all don't know how much this means to me. This night is something I'll never forget and cherish the rest of my life. You know, as I said in my interview, the beauty of this job is having the opportunity to work with people, to develop projects, and the best reward in the world is when I see in the paper where somebody gets an award that started out in a program that we helped develop with a mere small investment of ARC dollars. And the education that our Lieutenant Governor mentioned. I am so proud of what you all in Eastern Kentucky have with education. I'm talking about all of the regional colleges, the public and the private, and obviously the community and technical colleges. But that's a great asset. And you have leadership that keeps those institutions going. And that's one of the best things that I have witnessed, one of your best assets. And I want to thank the board for allowing me to receive this award. I've worked with many of you over the years. I've even worked for some of you. Governor Patton gave me the first opportunity in 1996 to start with the ARC program. And obviously, many I've worked actually with as employees. It's a special group, and I thank you so very much. And I love you people in East Kentucky. I always will. Thank you.
I'm happy to introduce our next award winner, Kane Kitchen, in partnership with Cowan Community Center and Mountain Comprehensive Health, created a nutrition program for the community in Letcher County that fed thousands of people in need, worked with the farmers market, started a free drive-in concert. So our next award winner that you'll see is Kane Kitchen and Valerie Horn for their work in bringing bright lights to our region during the dark time of COVID-19.
Community Agriculture Nutritional Enterprises, Inc., or better known as Kane Kitchen, serves people in Letcher and surrounding counties.
Just anyone in the community, and you might all be sitting at the same table and providing opportunity to talk together and be comfortable with one another and know one another.
Opening its doors to serve the community in August 2018.
This space in particular was well used by community. Weddings, wedding receptions, showers, community meetings, art, music happenings and activities would happen here.
And in early 2020, on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic, weddings, showers, and meetings came to an end.
I was in New Orleans with at a good food conference and was talking about the good things that were happening here.
The pandemic brought new worries.
We realized that there was an opportunity and a need for getting foods out to communities.
Kane Kitchen partnered with Cowan Community Action Group, which sponsors a USDA summer food program.
Met a strong need for the community. We had families who appreciated the access, that they could just drive through, open their trunk, groceries be put in the back.
It became a hub for USDA distribution, giving out 700,000 meals during the summer.
This allowed us to pass out 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches to a parent for the children that they had in their home.
Horn says other partnerships with Mountain Comprehensive Health Corporation and the City of Whitesburg continue to help folks during the pandemic.
This allowed us to pass out 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches to a parent for the children that they had in their home.
As the light at the end of the tunnel draws closer, organizations and people like Valerie Horn can breathe easier, knowing they gave out meals and hope.
That the most good comes to them because of those partnerships and that connection and that working together.
Congratulations to Valerie Horn and Kane Kitchen, a 2021 East Kentucky Leadership Award winner.
Hello everyone, Rocky Adkins here, and I'm proud to be joining the East Kentucky Leadership Annual Conference. I wish we could all be there in person because there's nothing like being home. But I'm proud we continue to do what's right to keep our people safe during this pandemic. Now you all know better than anyone, I'm Eastern Kentucky from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, and I'm proud of it. There is nothing more important to me than ensuring the success of this region, our entire Commonwealth, for the good of our people. This past year presented challenge after challenge, from the global COVID-19 pandemic that no one saw coming to the devastating ice storm and flooding. The people of Eastern Kentucky have experienced heartbreaking losses, but thankfully, we've always had Team Kentucky looking out for us. Now, I'm an old point guard, so I know the strength in having a good team that works together to ensure the success for everyone. And to do that, you need a strong leader, a leader who takes bold action and never overlooks the ultimate goal of getting that entire team across the finish line for a win. Here in the Commonwealth, we have that leader in our governor, and I am proud today to join the East Kentucky Leadership Foundation in presenting the 2021 Special Award to Governor Andy Beshear for his commitment and dedication to the health and safety of every single Kentuckian in the battle against COVID and beyond. In the early days of this pandemic, Governor Beshear took quick action and decisive action that ultimately helped save the lives of our fellow Kentuckians and sets our Commonwealth up to lead in a post-COVID economy. He had to make undeniably tough decisions, but he put politics aside and did what was right for our people. And because of his commitment to putting the safety and health of our people above all else, more Kentuckians are with us today, ready to receive one of 3 life-saving vaccines as we look ahead to a brighter, better Kentucky for all our people. I'm proud to work alongside Governor Beshear each and every day. And as an Eastern Kentuckian, I am proud to present him the first honoree who is not an Eastern Kentucky native with this award. But I'll tell you, the way he advocates for this region, I'd say he's an honorary Eastern Kentuckian at heart. Congratulations, Governor Beshear, and thank you for your commitment to the people of Kentucky.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for this incredible honor. I am truly touched to receive this special award from the East Kentucky Leadership Foundation. This year has been challenging. I admit I never expected to face a global pandemic and to do so in my first year as governor. But early on, as I understood the dangers of COVID-19, how bad it could be, I realized this would be the most important role I'd play in my entire professional career. I knew that my responsibility, my sacred duty, was to do whatever I could to protect the lives of our people. It hasn't been easy. It still isn't. But the type of leadership that was needed is where you put any concerns about your own political future, not just on the shelf, but you leave them behind you so you can make the very best decisions for your people. And that's truly what I did. I am proud of what we've accomplished. Our people showed compassion, and I tell you, I've never been more proud to be a Kentuckian. So thank you. It took all of us working together as a team, Team Kentucky, and that spirit is what is going to help us emerge from this pandemic stronger and better than ever before. And I've never been more optimistic as we vaccinate more and more and more Kentuckians each week, with all Kentuckians ages 16 and up now eligible for their shot of hope. And the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, they are modern medical miracles. They are the tools that will help as many Kentuckians as possible cross this finish line. So right now, our #1 priority in the Commonwealth is to meet the Team Kentucky vaccination challenge of 2.5 million Kentuckians vaccinated. Once we reach that milestone, things are going to look a lot more normal, with most capacity restrictions lifted for venues, retail, restaurants, and events that hold 1,000 or fewer patrons. So if you haven't received your shot of hope yet, please sign up today. They're safe, they're effective. Look what they've done in long-term care, where they have eliminated the loss that we felt so deeply. And it's easy. There are sites all across Kentucky with locations throughout the eastern region. From Pikeville Medical Center to King's Daughter Pavilion and Baptist Health Corbin, there are opportunities in nearly every community where you can get your shot tomorrow. We all want to get back to the things we love. I know I do. But we have to do it safely because we're still at war with this virus. This is an evil virus that has taken more than 6,340 of our fellow Kentuckians. These are our grandparents, our parents, our brothers, our sisters, our friends, our co-workers, and in some cases, even our children. We've lost doctors, nurses, teachers, bus drivers, a police chief, pastors, and even a 15-year-old student. These losses are heartbreaking, and the grief, it's difficult to process. But we must continue to fight in their honor and make sure their sacrifices were not made in vain. When we look back, when we recorded our first case on March 6, 2020, my administration took decisive action to implement requirements from everything from face coverings to social distancing to other policies meant to help protect our people. And we together have suppressed 3 major waves of infections. We built a robust testing program out of scratch. Do you remember early on when I would do those press conferences every day? And I'd have to say, unless you're really sick, don't get a test because there aren't enough. Now, through community and business partners, there are 360 locations across the Commonwealth where anybody can get a test on a moment's notice. We did that together. We created and maintain a strong 120-day stockpile of personal protective equipment, something even our emergency room nurses and others didn't have enough of, that we spent weeks and weeks and weeks on the phone chasing down every lead, most of them never materializing. But now we've delivered more than 18 million pieces of PPE to government, medical, and private sector entities, and more than 100 companies jumped in to help either by donating PPE or by producing it. And that helped ensure our healthcare heroes and other frontline workers could be better protected. Our Kroger testing partnership, which originated right here in Kentucky and provided over 70,000 tests, is now the national model the federal government uses for surge testing. We did that here, and now that partnership has evolved into regional vaccination sites throughout Kentucky. Since the start of the pandemic, Kentucky has provided more detailed data and information in real time to our people, including daily reports, infection demographics, positivity rates, and now vaccination efforts every day, just to name a little bit of the information that is out there. We distributed $1.6 billion in federal coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security act funding, which includes $40 million to create a food and beverage relief fund that helps so many of our locally impacted businesses. We provided hundreds of millions of dollars to cities and counties, including those across eastern Kentucky, to help make sure that you could get those services that are so vital on any given day. We provided over $298 million to make unemployment insurance system improvements, which were so necessary in a system that was simply overwhelmed. The CARES Act funding was absolutely critical. It cycled through the economy, helping to avert budget cuts and maintain a balanced budget. And it helped people directly, with more than $15 million helping people with their utilities and 15 more making sure they could stay in their homes, with now almost another $250 million helping make sure that nobody gets kicked out of where they live during this crisis. We have done all of this, facing a pandemic that none of us had ever seen before, a virus that hadn't existed until a month or two before it came to Kentucky. We had to start from scratch. But just 14 months and a few days or a week later, look at where we've come to. Just a year and change later, we now know that an effective virus response also goes hand in hand with a sustained economic recovery. Because every spike in COVID cases and deaths also creates a cascade of interruptions to our lives, to businesses, to our kids' schooling. We've seen it over and over this year. Let's not see it again. That significant burden that so many of you, all of us, have carried, we shouldn't have to endure through a fourth wave. We have all made sacrifices. And as your governor, I've never taken any action lightly. And I've fought every day to keep pushing ahead and building that better Kentucky we all want. But even while we've been fighting this virus, we've also fought to create good paying jobs, put education first, and ensure that healthcare is a basic human right. And we're doing it all while fostering retirements that are healthy and treating each other with dignity and respect. In 2020 alone, Team Kentucky worked on more than 270 economic development projects, totaling in excess of $2.56 billion in investment by private sector companies. They're going to create 8,700 full-time jobs for Kentuckians. In 2020, that wage of those projects is one of the highest in decades, and the second highest, we believe, in at least the last 10 to 20 years. We've announced incredible innovation projects right there in your backyard in Eastern Kentucky. Look at App Harvest in Moorhead, which is bringing more than 300 jobs in its first project and announced 2 others. It built one of the largest buildings in the world, the largest greenhouse in North America, with what I believe is the most sophisticated LED lighting system ever created. And it has already gone public, ringing the NASDAQ opening bell on February 1st. So our newest publicly traded company in Kentucky is from right there in Eastern Kentucky. We supported our rural communities with more than $124 million invested for 160 projects that are going to diversify regional economies and help provide clean drinking water. And while we work to build that bolder, brighter Kentucky, we've also had to face other challenges, especially in Eastern Kentucky. Earlier this year, we saw difficult storm after difficult storm. We saw ice, we saw snow, we saw sleet, and then we saw record flooding. That flooding, as you know, is some of the worst of our lifetimes, with more individual homes damaged than we have ever seen before. So Rocky and I were out there in your communities, even with COVID, wanted to make sure we saw it firsthand. Walking around the warming center in Ashland, talking to people, seeing if they're all right. Watching how the rains had devastated a road in Hazard that almost prevented a family with a young child from being able to get him to school and them to work. Making sure we toured Beattyville and the surrounding area that had dealt with historic flooding that had kept that town underwater for even several days. And during that, we activated states of emergency each time with the National Guard there in force. We delivered 40,000 gallons of water and more than 53,000 meals. And I've submitted 2 requests to President Biden for major disaster declarations, one for the ice storms, already approved, and the second to help those impacted by the flooding. Declarations like these ensure our communities have the necessary resources to rebuild during difficult times, and it highlights the urgency and extreme need for support. The priority was and always will be our people. We are strong, we are resilient, and we will build back. I've seen this spirit from you, from our people, from Eastern Kentuckians firsthand, and it's truly what gives me hope as we work together to find common good for our Commonwealth. Whether it was COVID or the flooding or the ice storms, our people have been asked to do a lot, but our collective actions have saved lives, and Kentucky is stronger and better prepared to defeat any obstacle we face. You know, you see so much in our news right now about our divisions, but just look at how many Kentuckians lived for each other this past year, not doing things they wanted to do because they might spread a virus, wearing a mask that was uncomfortable because they wanted to protect their neighbor, not seeing their relatives because they wanted to protect them and everyone around them. Look at what we did for each other during those difficult storms, providing shelter and warmth and food. We have so much that brings us together that it makes what divides us look so small. And so, as we look ahead, let's do so not with fear, but with courage. Let's agree, like this last year, to put aside squabbling and petty partisanship. Let's move beyond politics and division so that we can make bold investments in our people and continue to live for each other. Because Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12 tells us that hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrong. I pledge I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure Kentucky leads in the post-COVID economy and that we are better people and more united to come out of this. So I pledge to lead in ways that show love, compassion, and understanding, because those emotions aren't weakness. They are the incredible strength that we need to build the Commonwealth that we love. Thank you for this incredible honor and for letting me speak with you today. I hope that you feel as optimistic as I do about this new chapter as we're entering in Kentucky. As I've always said, we'll get through this together, and I've never been more confident about that than now. Thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you, Governor Beshear, for taking the time to share your message with us, and congratulations on the special award that we're happy to present to you for your leadership during this pandemic. I want to thank all of you who have participated in the conference today, and look forward to having you join us again tomorrow morning when we'll have 5 breakout sessions, including the digital divide, where we'll follow up on some of that conversation we had this morning about how we make sure the access to broadband is available to everyone. We'll have a session on resources to rise again, looking at all of the new resources that are available to help businesses and communities come back online as we come out of the pandemic. We're going to have a great session on women in leadership, featuring an introduction by Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman. We'll have a session on healthcare in the pandemic, a time when it's become more important than ever that we are able to take care of everyone. And finally, a session on getting East Kentucky back to work, removing barriers to employment. So again, thank you for being with us today, and I hope you'll join us tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for part 2 of this year's online East Kentucky Leadership Conference. Good morning, and welcome to day 2 of the East Kentucky Leadership Conference. My name is Peter Hilley. I serve as the board chair for the East Kentucky Leadership Foundation, and I want to thank everybody who's been part of putting this together. If you missed yesterday's sessions, you can see a lot of that on the WYMT Facebook page, and there's also a link to that coverage on the East Kentucky Leadership Foundation's Facebook page. We really appreciate our partners at WYMT providing such excellent coverage, which also includes the governor's keynote address in its entirety. So again, you can find that on the WYMT Facebook page or the East Kentucky Leadership Foundation's Facebook page. To quote Governor Beshear from yesterday, we have so much that brings us together that it makes what divides us look so small. We had a great panel yesterday on bridging the divide, and I want to thank all of those panelists for doing such a great job. I also want to encourage you today to take a look at the booths in the expo section on the Hopin platform. We've got some great exhibits in there and encourage you to take the opportunity to look around. We've got some excellent breakout sessions this morning, and we're going to start those shortly. Every hour, we'll start the hour with one of our leadership awards, and then we'll go into the concurrent breakout sessions. So we have 3 more awards to present this morning. Then we want to be sure that you come back to the main stage after the last breakout session for an address by Tim Thomas, the federal co-chair of the Appalachian Regional Commission, and a preview of next year's conference in Corbin. Now I want to invite Hannah to come to the main stage and provide a little reminder on how to find your way around the Hopin site.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Hannah.
Welcome back, everyone. We're glad to see you back for day 2. I wanted to hop on real quick and just go over a couple things about the software before we get started today. So I'm going to share my screen super quick. Okay, can you see that, Peter?
I can.
Okay, great. So as soon as we get done with our opening remarks, there'll be the first award presentation, and then we'll go into the breakout sessions for the day. You all will be able to find those on the left side of the screen under the Sessions tab right here. I'm going to click it so you all can see what that will look like. Here you can see the list of breakout sessions that we have today. We have 5 different sessions, and there will be 3 different time slots for all 5 of those, so you can attend more than one. Within every session, what you'll see on the screen are the presenters doing their presentations, and the virtual conversation will take place in the chat bar on the right side of the screen. So we encourage you to take advantage of the chat, ask questions, make comments, and just get the most out of the experience today. We also wanted to mention that some people yesterday had some issues with their Hopin not moving on automatically. So if that's happening for you, just refresh the page and that should help. Some people also mentioned that if they return to the reception and click the next event in the agenda, that helped as well. Connectivity is an issue for us, and sometimes that causes problems. But if you're having issues, usually a refresh will solve the problems. And that's all I have this morning, Peter.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. And I just want to say we couldn't do this without Hannah and without the partnership of the folks at SOAR who have provided access to the Hopin platform. But Hannah's the one behind the scenes. She's our own Wizard of Oz, pulling all the levers and pushing the buttons to make sure that this works. And we certainly appreciate everything that you've done to make this possible, Hannah.
Absolutely.
And now I'm happy to take us on to our first award of the day, after which you'll go on to your breakout sessions. And we'll see you back here on the main stage at the end of the morning.
For 22 years, Jeff Capps has held the reins at Eastern Broadcasting Company in Harlan County,
Eastern Broadcasting,
keeping several radio stations on the air despite a struggling economy and just a few employees.
we had 5. I always dreamed of more. I didn't think our economy would support it.
Financially, basketball season is the best for Capps, and in March of 2020, the advertising dollars were pouring in.
I run the numbers off the computer and thought, man, this is a good March.
But then Matt Jones with KSR came on the radio with the news the SEC tournament was canceled, and soon the NCAA tournament was also scratched off the books.
We had written off $30,000. It was a punch in the gut, and no replacement. It was gone. There's nothing to replace it with.
Thinking of the money, Capps did not know where to turn, but then he picked himself up and got to work.
So I instantly switched to, I'm going to outwork this thing. I'm going to outwork this coronavirus.
He focused on 2 things, making payroll and staggering his workers' hours to follow CDC guidelines and keep his employees healthy.
But put your safety first. If you don't want to work, do not work.
Struggling through the spring and summer, Capps set his eyes on football season, hoping advertising dollars would once again come in. But then he hit a roadblock. His broadcasting crew could not work as they needed to keep their families safe.
Here's our way to step back and get it moving, and I don't have employees to do it.
With no money, he hired 4 new employees, and somehow the bills got paid, everyone pitching in and learning something new.
I'm asking my employees to teach me something.
As basketball season rolled around, Capps hired 6 more employees as he began streaming local games on Facebook, YouTube, and Harlan Community Television.
We'll be back, 1410 WHLN, Green Dragon Radio and live stream.
It was kind of our saving grace through the winter and the spring, and it gave everyone new life. It gave our town new life.
Now, as 1 year has passed, advertising is once again rolling in, and their broadcasting content is fresh and new.
The crazy thing is it going to be as good as it was? It's going to be better. What I thought was the nail in the coffin is turned out and give us all new life.
During it all, Capps looked not at the next day or week. He focused on surviving the long haul.
If we would have put money first, would it have worked? I don't think so. We stepped up and did what was right first, and then hopefully we'll survive the pandemic by doing what was right.
The pandemic forcing change that ultimately created a better company. Congratulations to Jeff Capps, a 2021 East Kentucky Leadership Award winner.
Like many things, it started with a dream.
It was really weird. I would dream about outfits that what I wanted them to look like, and then the next day I would make them.
And with a lot of work and time, it became real life for Cassie Burgess.
It was just a long time dream for me to have. I've always wanted to be my own boss, I guess, you know, and still be able, like I said, to be mom and be able to go and do with my kids what I needed to do.
When Burgess opened Glitzy Boutique 5 years ago, she was prepared to take a dive as a one-stop shop for clothing and glamour for the people of Lawrence County, where she has lived for nearly 20 years.
Life is short, you know, and you never know what's going to happen. Everything can be fine one day and you can be hit with something the next day.
That is a lesson Burgess learned when the COVID-19 pandemic began to impact her small town of Louisa and tapped out her small business.
Like, this is my life's dream. Like, how's it going to affect, you know? But it is what it is right now. We have to shut down.
So she struggled, watching her life's work tear at the seams.
I'm at home, you know, my store's closed, there's nobody coming in, there's nobody shopping, so what can I do? What do I have? What use can I make of myself?
But she saw another pressing need for her friends and neighbors in the medical field.
It's like, okay, well, I can sew, number one. My friends, they don't have masks. They're running out of everything that they have.
And instead of focusing on what to do for her own business, she started stitching up a little care for her community, working to serve the servants through their time of need by making masks.
It helps a little bit to know that you're helping the ones that are really in it. They're really saving lives. They're, in there and they're helping people get better, or they're having to come and tell loved ones that they've lost a loved one. I couldn't imagine being in that position.
Taking inspiration from the healthcare heroes across the state as the world started working together to make it through.
Just because the going gets tough doesn't mean you stop going.
And making a plan to work with her own network to make sure her community has a boutique to go back to when everything returns to normal.
I felt like it was important for it to stay open. However we had to do it,
So, picking up partners and selling part of her operation to a couple of friends, the space now stands as Nika Dawn Boutique.
Learning to cope and learning to deal and learning to adapt.
But Burgess says any success in her life starts and ends with a focus on serving others.
It's always so much better to help others first, because God will always provide for you in the end.
Something she hopes to pass on to her kids as she continues along the journey.
It's been an adventure, and it's turned out to be a nice adventure.
Growing by giving. Congratulations to Cassie Burgess, a 2021 East Kentucky Leadership Award winner.
For more than 3 decades, Brenda Moses has dedicated her life to KCEOC Community Action Partnership, first as a volunteer, now as a public resource director, overseeing 5 programs, but mainly the summer feeding program.
We try to find what we call a food desert, is where food is not readily available for people to have access to healthy foods.
When school shut down March 12, 2020, Moses knew children needed to be fed, so she contacted the Kentucky Department of Education, and they suggested she start the summer feeding program immediately.
Children got fresh meals 5 days a week.
But it was not that simple, as Moses had to figure out COVID safety procedures along with new protocols, policies, and waivers.
There was a lot of homework, a lot of research on how processes of how to do things. And once again, like I said, we're a part of a lot of coalitions and we share a lot of information.
KCEOC typically feeds children in congregate settings. Now parents had to pick it up and leave. Through the summer, 5 routes were run each day in Knox County and 4 in Harlan County.
I think it was between this location and the Harlan location, it was close to 6,000 meals a day.
Pushing out more meals than ever before, Moses struggled to get as much food as she needed.
A lot of the companies that we dealt with, they had problems of getting food from the manufacturer, so we had to adapt on that.
So she also partnered with local farmers, not only helping the economy, but providing fresh fruit and vegetables for the kids.
We didn't realize that children in this area didn't know what a fresh pear was. And that's something that is served weekly.
But as school started in the fall, Moses found she was facing yet another barrier, winter weather. So she switched the meal program to deliver 1 week's worth of food at once.
It allows you to focus on that one route that day, so you can prepare more fresh fruits and vegetables and have it readily available, so that way the food is fresher as they receive it.
Now, more than 1 year later, KCEOC has given out more than 1 million meals.
It's tripled. It's unreal. It's a lot of food. It's actually given us the opportunity to be more open-minded and to think outside the box and to be able to adapt. That's what our new motto is. We adapt every day. No 2 days are the same.
To meet even more needs, Moses partnered with USDA and Save the Children to distribute nearly 2,500 30-pound food boxes once a week to community partners.
It takes a village to do it.
Through all the hardships, Moses learned to adapt, helping meet needs she never knew existed.
We're the voice of the poor, and we're just like our motto for summer feeding, we're feeding hope.
Congratulations, Brenda Moses, a 2021 East Kentucky Leadership Award winner.
Hello, I'm ARC Federal Co-Chairman Tim Thomas, and it is an honor to have the opportunity to speak with you all today as you wrap up what I know has been an enlightening and informative 2 days of information sharing. I want to thank Mountain Association President Peter Hilley for his work and for continuing this important annual event despite the challenging circumstances. I also want to be able to recognize Bill Weinberg, who serves on the East Kentucky Leadership Board. Thank you, Bill, for your life of dedication to helping the people of Appalachia, Kentucky. Now, my understanding is that you heard from Governor Beshear yesterday, and I have to say I have enjoyed working with him and his team and many of you to encourage economic growth throughout Eastern Kentucky. I regret my schedule doesn't allow me to join you live in real time. I really would have enjoyed that interaction, but I commend you for taking part in this program. I'm nearing the end of my time as ARC Federal Co-Chairman, and I had the opportunity to speak at this conference as one of my very first appearances after being confirmed to the position back in 2018. I think it is fitting that now I can speak to you as my time as Federal Co-Chairman begins to wind down, and I prepare to pass the torch, as they say. Though this may be the last time I get to speak to you all in this role, I have to say that I'm immensely encouraged by the enthusiasm and great works in progress both in Eastern Kentucky and throughout the Appalachian region. And that is a credit to each of you and the work that you do daily to better your communities. On a similar note, one of the programs that we recently started at ARC that I am particularly excited about and proud of is our own Appalachian Leadership Institute. Each year, we bring together 40 leaders from across the region to give them skills and information necessary to improve their community. In fact, our inaugural meeting of the first leadership group was held in Moorhead in 2019, and we were honored to have former Kentucky Governor Paul Patton as a guest speaker. We also had Megan Brennan, who was the Postmaster General of the United States at that time, as a keynote speaker. Megan is a native of the Appalachian part of Pennsylvania and has returned there for her retirement. Two items I stressed to that group at the time was that we recognized the necessity of empowering and supporting local leaders in Appalachia and the critical role each of you play in combating the narrative challenge, which is too often and unfairly focuses on the negative. Our communities are all unique. We have successes and challenges we share with others. And one we share with the entire region is a narrative challenge. The narrative of Appalachia focuses often exclusively on where we fall short. We need to change that narrative because there are so many ways our communities exceed, particularly when it comes to things like arts and music, our natural beauty, our hardworking and creative workforce, our sense of community and neighborliness to one another, and our can-do attitude. Conferences like this have given you some new tools to change that narrative and allow your community to tell the positive story and hopefully change some minds around the country about the region we all care about. If you are interested in further leadership development opportunities, I encourage you to consider applying for the ARC Appalachian Leadership Institute. Now, we group leadership programs under the broad heading of capacity development. That is, they help prepare leaders in Appalachia who are then equipped to do more impactful things. The challenge that is at the front of everyone's mind, and I'm sure you discussed at length throughout this conference, and that is the current and future challenges posed by COVID-19. The
past year has brought significant difficulties for our communities and our businesses. We have an opportunity to emerge stronger than ever if we make sure we take the right steps to ensure success. I read an interesting article recently in which the writer predicted that over the long term, rural areas may well emerge from the pandemic stronger, but that urban areas might face a period of decline as it becomes clear that many of the well-paying jobs previously performed in urban cores can be performed remotely from anywhere, and that a significant degree of those workers will not be returning to their previous office space. Those people are up for grabs, so to speak, if an area has suitable access to broadband service. Of course, not all of Appalachia does, but some parts do, and more is coming, particularly with state investment, which Kentucky is seeing a lot of, and with new providers entering the field, such as rural electric cooperatives becoming internet service providers in addition to providing electricity. Over the last 3 years, as I've traveled extensively through Appalachia, I've increasingly found two things to be true. In fact, I've adopted these things as maxims of a sort. First, if a problem exists in a community, the solution to that problem ultimately will be found in that same community. People with firsthand knowledge who have personal stakes in the outcome tend to be the best solution finders. Realizing this can be the basis for a formula for success, and I am confident it is a formula that will help communities throughout Eastern Kentucky emerge stronger from whatever challenges they may be dealing with. The second maxim I would leave you with is that a lack of resources is not a barrier. I know it sounds strange to say that, but it's true. A lack of resources is not a barrier. A lack of ideas is a barrier. Realize the relative importance of a scarcity of resources, whether it be funds or people or some other commodity. It, of course, presents a challenge, but those things or lack thereof are subordinate to the transformative power of ideas. In closing, I noticed the theme for this year's conference, and that is bright lights in dark times. I have to say that the way I look at it, each of you serve as that bright light in your community, and your desire to help your community shine brighter is commendable. I recently told the 2021 ALI class that it is important to continue to grow as leaders and learn how to use leadership as a skill. This applies to you as well. Leadership is a skill, one that can be applied in contexts professional and personal throughout your life, and the ability to learn and grow as a leader is also a skill. So I encourage you to keep at it, keep growing, keep seeking opportunities like this one to increase your knowledge and skills. Perhaps remember those two maxims that I mentioned to you. And I'm confident that because of local leaders like you, we will leave behind a brighter Appalachia with more opportunities to grow and thrive, healthier, better educated, and with hopefully a little more money in their pockets. Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you, Tim. ARC is a great resource, and we really appreciate Tim taking the time to talk with us today. Also, I want to follow up on something Justin Maxson mentioned yesterday. President Biden has created an interagency working group to address the needs of coal and energy communities. And a lot of that effort is directed at communities like ours. While we were meeting this morning, I got an email from the White House announcing the release of the Interagency Working Group's initial report, and I put a link to a summary of that report in the chat just now. Please check it out. That report directly addresses investing in economic revitalization in Appalachia, and it identifies priorities for funding that include workforce development, entrepreneurship, industry clusters, substance use disorders, and broadband access. Doesn't that sound a lot like what we've been talking about here for the last 2 days? Now, these new resources are important, but they will only work well if people like all of you dig in and help figure out how to use these resources well, because you're the experts on your communities. So let's all keep tracking these new initiatives as they roll out. Now, I want to turn it over to Stephanie to tell us a little bit about plans for next year's conference. Stephanie?
Thanks, Peter. As our board representative from Whitley County, I'm here today in my role as a spokesperson for Corbin, who's going to be hosting the 2022 conference. And fingers crossed, this one will be post-COVID and in person so that you all can come to enjoy all of what we have come to know as the Corbin Renaissance, with our revitalized downtown with 100% occupancy. We've got fantastic food-to-table restaurants. If you haven't heard about the Wrigley Pub, you certainly should find the tap room. And right up the road from Cumberland Falls. So we've got everything that you will need to have a fantastic experience in Eastern Kentucky, and we sure do hope to see you in Corbin next year.
Thank you, Stephanie. Well, this has been a great conference, and honestly, none of us knew how it was going to work, but it worked, and it worked because you made it work. And we'll be putting all the videos from this conference online, so please keep an eye on our Facebook page for updates. It'll probably take us a few days, but keep your eyes out. I also want to thank again all of our sponsors, our presenters, all of the EKLF board members, and our partners at WYMT and SOAR. WYMT has done a great job with their coverage, and they've got a lot of the conference coverage already up on their Facebook page, so please check that out. And again, a special shout out to Hannah for wrangling us through this so gracefully. And with that, we'll close out this year's conference. I look forward to seeing you all in person next year in Corbin. And meanwhile, stay safe, wear your masks, get your shots, help your neighbors, and keep up the good work.